Hi, good morning, almost afternoon, everyone. My name is Tabi Jones Wohleber. I'm a speech language pathologist. I work for Frederick County Public Schools in Maryland. I'm on the assistive technology team, and I also work with West Virginia Birth to Three as a speech pathologist. But I specialize in augmentative and alternative communication. That's really what has been my passion forever as an SLP. It's why I became an SLP. So I am really excited to share with you today a session about communication basics. And I became connected with the ASF through the communication pilot project that Erin Sheldon led up last year. And so we, through that process, really kind of invested a lot of sort of time and mental energy into trying to figure out like how best to support communication partners of those who use AAC. So today I'm kind of bringing you some of the highlights from that from that experience. But really, we tried to distill it down so that if you're just starting on your AAC journey, or even if you've already been on your AAC journey for a while, some of this might be a review at the very beginning, but then we're going to dive into some strategies about how to really be an effective and compelling communication partner. So those are our links for today in the chat. And then I also am going to share another link as we go through today. These are PDFs, screenshots that I'm sharing now from a variety of communication devices. If you have a device, you want to click on the link that corresponds to the device that your AAC learner is using. And if you haven't yet identified a device, you can choose one of those, or there's one that I will show on the screen periodically that you can use as well. And the reason that I invite you to have an AAC board open is because as we go through some of the strategies, I think it's beneficial to just have a point of reference of what this looks like in an AAC format. So yeah, that's what that second document is for. Again, those are PDFs of screenshots, so you can choose the one that corresponds best to your need. All right. So our agenda today is I am going to go through 5 foundational understandings. And I just want to point out that there's 2 foundational understandings that I'm not going to address because I think that they're just so inherent and kind of expressed universally. One is that I always approach AAC from a presumed potential mindset. And that means that I believe we cannot support learners to be effective communicators if we don't give them opportunity. So regardless of how, of what they are giving us in terms of showing any form of competence, we continue to provide them opportunities to learn always and always. The second is that autonomous communication is really our goal. So we want individuals, we want their unique voice to be heard. So the strategies that I'm going to share and go through with you, you'll notice that there is, we're not really looking for compliance, but really looking to support individuals to be very autonomous in their communication. So in addition to those 5 foundational understandings, we're going to look at 5 strategies that allow us to plan for and prepare to be an AAC partner. 5 strategies for speaking AAC as a communication partner, and 5 strategies for inviting participation or responding to what our AAC learner, whatever response they may give us. So that's our agenda for today. Okay, so here we go. Foundational, and what you'll notice is that these really build on one another. There's so much interconnectedness. Communication is anything but a silo. So every one of these topics is very integrated into the others. So the first is that we are all multimodal communicators. We want to empower individuals by their communication by honoring any modality that they give us. And that's kind of shorthand for we're not going to force AAC, but we're going to respond to what individuals give us and use AAC to take our turn in that interaction so that we are actively acknowledging their communication and letting them know that we see them as a communicator. So just to kind of break this down a little bit, AAC is not just a device. It's not just a communication board. It's not just a voice output button. I am so sorry. AAC is an umbrella term for all the strategies, modalities, and tools that we use in order to be a communicator. And back that up for a second. You and I are multimodal communicators as well. You know, we are currently communicating via a video platform. We also communicate on a daily basis via email and text, face-to-face, phone, social media. There's just so many ways that we all communicate. But communication kind of falls into strategies, fall into these two different there's unaided and then there's aided. So unaided means that there's no stuff. These are the ways that we communicate through our bodies. So eye gaze and gestures and facial expressions, clearly very nonverbal modes of communication, but also body language and vocalizations. You know, vocalizations convey meaning even though they aren't a specific word. Verbal speech is an unaided form of communication, and sign language as well. Many individuals who use AAC and with Angelman syndrome may have access to some signs that are pretty specific. Aided communication, by contrast, is the stuff. It's the tangible things that we use in order to communicate. Now, it might be paper-based or low-tech, such as just paper-based symbols or communication boards or books, but it may also be technologically based. So it might require batteries or a charger or have a computer interface. And those include our simple voice output buttons, our communication devices, and our alternative access tools. So we're really looking at all the ways that we can pull these things together to give individuals as many opportunities as possible to be the most effective communicator that they can be. And I just want to point out that we want to value those unaided forms of communication as well, though we're going to talk about why it's so important to map it to aided form. The difference between being a communicator and being a language user is that communicators can often use nonverbal forms of communication to express big ideas, but AAC provides access to language. So our second foundational understanding is just that. Language is the gateway that allows us to reach our potential. And for individuals who benefit from AAC, robust AAC is what is needed in order for that potential to be realized. So when we think of language as the gateway to one's potential, we want to think about the role of nonverbal communication, and that is that it conveys information about the current, the time, the here and now, this time and place. Chances are you are able to interpret what your loved one wants much of the time because of their ability to express what they want, need, and think in the here and now. But symbolic language is a bridge. Symbolic language includes written and spoken words, as well as signs and symbols. This is what allows us to create meaning. We combine symbols to share information, to express our ideas, to talk about our experiences beyond the here and now. And this is a point that none of us like to kind of have to talk about, but individuals with disabilities are more vulnerable. It's really important that they be able to tell us about things that have happened and experiences that they have had beyond the here and now, for their own safety and to protect themselves. So robust AAC is the modality that it provides this framework for giving individuals access to language. Robust AAC is a term that is thrown around, and I think that it's really important to define it and to really know what is meant by robust AAC. I think a lot of times we use, robust AAC and core words can be thought of somewhat interchangeably. But just to be really concrete about this, robust AAC has specific components and functions, and I imagine there are others that would add to this list or shift this list a little bit, but I think that this can give you a good idea about what we're looking at when we think about robust AAC. The components include core words, fringe words that are meaningful, social words. It includes the alphabet, because the alphabet is the only symbol set that allows you to say everything. And without the alphabet, we can't teach individuals how to use the alphabet and how the alphabet works and what to do with it. It also needs to be organized and customizable because language is pattern-based. So we want a system that is also pattern-based. This allows us to create a mental cognitive schema for where things are and a motor plan for how to access them. And customizable because, individuals are dynamic and ever-growing creatures. We need to make it work for us even as we change over time. The functions include, it has to have messages for communication partners. as well as for the AAC user. It has to have it for the communication partner because our AAC users, they learn language by seeing how language is used around them. Just like all of us, we all learn language that way. And then we also want to make sure there's communication repair strategies. So that might be a word like, oops, that's not what I meant. Or it might be the clear button with a head shake. But there has to be a way to say, to fix a misunderstanding as well. So if we look at a couple of familiar tools, we can kind of see how they measure up. If you have symbols, a baggie of symbols, you can quickly see that these are going to be mostly fringe words for the AAC user, but it doesn't meet the other components and functions. Core words, social words, maybe. It kind of depends on who's developing them and what the purpose is. So this might have a role during some activity or a specific location, but this is not an AAC system. Similarly, a single button device. This can definitely serve a function. If you have a partner assisted scanner, this might be how they select their message, but you're going to need the pod book or the other part of the system that has the language in it. You might be able to share messages back and forth between home and school using this kind of device. You might be able to have a child activate trick or treat for a really specific purpose, but this is not an AAC system. A core board. Core boards can absolutely be a gateway into experiencing and learning and getting started with AAC because it has those core words that we're going to talk in a minute about why those are important and what function they serve. This particular board has some blank spaces, so we might be able to integrate some fringe and social. It does have an organizational strategy, but limited customization, and the organization isn't always completely evident. But it does meet all of the function criteria. So, again, this is a way to get started, a way to get you out of the gate, but it's not a robust AAC system. Robust AAC systems are going to include your dedicated devices, your robust AAC apps, and also POD is another robust system. So as we think about how important it is to provide kids, individuals, AAC learners, how to provide them access to move from a communicator to a language learner, and how to start to put those pieces together. We want to look at the importance of robust AAC. The alphabet is important. I won't go into a lot of detail. There's several things on here, but essentially kids learn about the alphabet because they get feedback about the alphabet. And this happens really young when kids are just starting to notice squiggles and letters. We start to teach them the first letter of their name. Kids have so many literacy experiences before they even enter kindergarten. And individuals with complex communication needs, and those, including those with Angelman syndrome, there are other things that often prioritize their time, related to medical needs, sensory needs, health needs, and the nature of the way that they interact and engage, such that those experiences may not come to them naturally. So by including the alphabet in their AAC, we're helping to provide them access to so that they can start to get some of that feedback to build some of those early literacy experiences. The other thing is the alphabet's a great way to repair. So if you are looking for a monkey and monkey is not in your system, you can point to M and make that connection, M for monkey, and start to help to build those foundational connections. Okay, foundational understanding number 3. Language development is our guide when using and teaching AAC. This is sort of like what I cry from the mountaintops in my district. We have to look at language development. The thing about language development is kids develop receptive and expressive language, through their experiences as they grow and develop. And the same is true of AAC. AAC is a concrete representation of language. It slows down the interaction. It provides a map, whereas words that come out of our mouth, they're kind of gone. You can't look at them or touch them or grab them and revisit them. They're gone. So when we're taking language and we're mapping it to an AAC system, it's concrete, it's visual, it's that, it doesn't go away. And they can look at it and revisit it. So it supports that receptive understanding as well as the expressive part of language. So there's 3 parts to this that we're going to go through. The first is that the reasons that we communicate. So there are 6 basic reasons that we communicate. And if you look at any dynamic and you parse out each exchange within an interaction, you can kind of identify what the purpose of each exchange is. So these include things like advocating for wants and needs. And on an AAC system, it might look like help or more, or put on, or get back, or open. And when I just want to point out the word, I think the word advocate is really important here, because it helps us to recognize the importance of self-advocacy. When I'm writing IEP goals or helping teams think through IEP goals for AAC learners, I think that moving beyond express wants and needs to self-advocate or demonstrate self-advocacy by expressing wants and needs helps to reframe it, and it's much more powerful. So wants and needs can include choice making, but it can also include asking for help. It can also include directing the actions of others. So just to kind of keep that as broad as possible, that helps to keep it as interesting as possible as well. Refuse or complain is another purpose for communicating. So, and this might look like no, don't, go, I think go away, not like, or just straight up saying bad. Social closeness is so foundational. Communication is so foundational to the human experience, and this is really, such an important part of social closeness. We might comment and say things like, such as like, or come, inviting someone to join, my turn, so having a back and a forth, enjoying one another. Do more, as in do that again. Look, so drawing attention to something, to share information, we are telling what we see, know, recognize in our environment, what we're learning, what we're noticing. So we might use phrases such as, it's big, we go out, look up, that goes on, or he doesn't get it, or he doesn't get that. Sharing information becomes really important when kids are in school, and a lot of times they're asked to share information, share what they know by recalling vocabulary words. But I think that when we can kind of turn that and use core words to show, an understanding as opposed to a vocabulary word, that can be really powerful. Perhaps a conversation for another day, but just to kind of consider that. Commenting will include phrases such as "I like it" or "It's not good." We might go into our descriptors or our comments and say "awesome." Kids are really motivated when we use words like "awesome" or "cool." We can go into our other descriptors and think about scary or funny or things like that. And it's also, think about comments that kids their age or individuals their age are using. I have 2 boys, they're 7 and 9, and they use the word epic all the time. So if they were using an AAC device, I would absolutely make sure that the word epic was programmed in there. Though I don't think I've ever seen a device that has that word in it quite yet. Asking questions is another communicative function. So 2-year-olds are infamous for their questioning of why, what's that, why, what's that. Well, it's really important. It's a way for them to gain important information about their environment. It helps them to understand their world. It's an important part of development. So we want to help individuals, and perhaps by asking the questions for them to show them how. What's in there? Where does it go? Do you want it, need it, have it? Who's that? So these comprise, the body of communicative functions. And I, as an AAC communication partner, I kind of keep this as the checklist in the back of my head, because when I am having an interaction with an individual, I want to draw from these, maybe not all of them, but from multiple functions so that I can have a really dynamic and interesting and ongoing conversation. Oops. When we are pulling all of these together, we're more than just meeting a want and a need, but we're also helping individuals to show what they are learning and understanding. We're helping them to express their personality by expressing our own. We are building and maintaining relationships, again, so fundamental, and having fun through it because there's variety and interest throughout. So communicate for a variety of purposes. It really will make your day. The second thing that I want to talk about is core vocabulary. And I'm going to define core vocabulary, and then I'll talk about how it relates to language development. For those of you who are already on your AAC journey, you're probably somewhat familiar with the term core vocabulary, so I'm not going to talk a ton about this, but I don't want to leave it out. Core vocabulary, these are high frequency words They tend not to be nouns, though I would argue that every individual has their own sort of corpus of core words that are their own. And that may include nouns, but those are highly personalized, and if they're important, then they have to be included. But generally, core words are the words that make up about 80% of what we say. They tend to have multiple meanings, so you can use them across contexts. I think of the word go as a good example. You might use the word go to say, I want to go, as in leave. I want to go out or go in, as in change the environment slightly. I want to go to the bathroom, which is to meet a personal need. I want you to go away. Or direct the action of others by saying, make it go, as in like make the car go, if something you might be playing with. So across context, within a known context, the word can mean multiple things, and it's inferred. So across environments and activities, and core words are a key feature of a well-developed AAC system, because when you turn on your app, when you open up the book, chances are core vocabulary is what is going to be on the front page. POD is slightly different because of its organization. However, core vocabulary is embedded, throughout POD very effectively. So core words include verbs. And if you just kind of take a look at these words as they come up on the screen, you'll probably, if you think about the conversations that you've had already today, chances are you have already used many of these words. So it includes our high frequency action words. It includes a variety of describing words about sort of everyday life and everyday interactions. Prepositions, prepositions and verbs also often go together to make those phrases. It includes pronouns, because pronouns will often replace the names of people or labels for items with a pronoun. It includes question words, because we have questions about our world and we need to be able to express those. It also includes negation. So with these words, we are meeting this long-term need that individuals have for flexibility. If we really focus a lot on nouns, of course we want to give access to things that are important, but if we spend a lot of time focusing on recalling nouns, then we're really interfering with productive practice to use words that are going to be a lot more flexible long-term. So how does this relate to language development? I'm glad you asked. When kids' first words are going to be highly, highly meaningful. So a child may say, get picked up, and that might be their first word. Or a child might use a noun like dog or ball or cup, and those might be their first words. We as communication partners, without even thinking about it, respond to that child with more language. We say, oh, you want up. So we take up and we expand it, and we expand it with core words. You want, and then up itself as a core word. If a child is asking for a cup, we might say, oh, let's get your cup. If they're looking for the ball, oh, the ball is fun, or the ball goes high, or where is the ball? If they say dog, we might say, you love your dog. Where is the dog? Let's feed the dog. And all the words that we wrap around that one word that the child gave us, they're generally core words. And then when kids start to put words together, they don't put cup and dog together. Those two words don't go together in a natural way. When they start to put words together, they put together a core word plus, whatever their word is. So like dog, want dog, where dog are the types of words that they're going to put together. So core vocabulary is very much embedded in language development. But it is this balance of making sure that kids do have access to words that are going to motivate and invite them to want to be a part of that communication exchange. So just another way to illustrate this, the use of core words in everyday interactions is heavily weighted. They are the glue in our language. Somebody once used the analogy of a Lego project where you have all the little blocks that make up most of a project, but then you have like the wheels, then those are the fringe words. Those are the really specialized and specific and precise words. So in everyday interactions, we use core words a ton, and we don't use as many fringe words, even though they have an importance in terms of making our language precise and specific. But the prevalence of fringe words is much greater. So when we're looking at AAC, we really kind of have to weigh up, we want to use core words as much as possible to give individuals that practice. It gives them the biggest bang for their buck. We're not abandoning our fringe words, but we're trying to find the balance in there. So the next concept under language development is our guide is modeling. Modeling goes by lots of different terms in the literature. It might be called aided language stimulation, aided language input, kind of a host of other types of words. But it essentially means speak your words and use AAC to do it. Children who grow up in Japan are going to learn Japanese because that's the language that's modeled in their environment. Children who grow up with deaf parents who use sign language are going to grow up learning sign language. It also, if you think about the way that kids develop language, if you have children who are verbal in your life, you'll know that the words that they use are very much reflective of the words that are used in the household that they grow up in terms of phrasing and cadence and that kind of thing. So we are going to do a little bit of an activity. I just want to say that this particular core board is from the Center for Disability and Literacy Studies. It's part of Project Core. It tends to be the core board that I use in terms of kind of a generic way to represent core vocabulary, because they put a lot of thought and time into developing a board that that allows you to say a lot with sort of a high frequency core words, and they've kind of already done the legwork of figuring out what those words are. So this is the example board that I will use as we go through this. But this is the time when, if you want to pull out a communication board that your loved one who uses AAC is using, or if you're exploring one, you can do that as well. I'm sorry. After this, don't do it for this one. My mistake. It won't work. So what we're going to do is I am going to give you a couple of phrases, and I want you to just practice them. Okay. All right, so the first phrase, you can point with your finger on your screen, or you can just use your eyes. I want you to create this phrase, generate this phrase. You like it. I'm going to pause between each one, but I'm also going to kind of keep this going just so that we don't run out of time. I can help. The next one, can he do? Not do that. Put it on. Maybe in a different tone. Put it on. Okay, last one. Look, that turns. Now, in the chat, I want you to just jot a note, a word, a phrase. What was that experience like for you? Was it hard or easy? How did it feel? Okay, so far we have challenging, hard, because you had to fish for the words, absolutely. Doable. Okay. I think generally it's not took a long time to find what I wanted to say. Some words were missing, hard to find what you're looking for. I think as we're just kind of becoming familiar with a tool, we do spend a lot of time searching, and I think it's important that we attend to that emotional response, that it feels challenging, it feels like a struggle, it feels like you're kind of having to hunt around and look for it, because I think that gives us good information about the experience of our AAC users when modeling isn't provided, when they haven't had enough experience with a tool. So now I'm going to model a phrase for you. I'm going to go through it 2 times. And then after I'm done, I'm going to have you generate that phrase, and we're going to talk about that. Okay, here we go. Oops. Do you put all that in? I may be thinking about a cooking activity or a craft activity. Do you put all that in? All right, so go ahead and do that one. And then drop a note in the chat. How does it feel? Is it hard, difficult, easier? What are your thoughts? Okay, so much better is the first comment. Far easier, more confidence. I think that that's a really important word, confidence. I think that when we are seeing how other people are using it, it does give us confidence. It does, and it makes it feel so much more accessible, so much more possible. It feels easier. And so think about the emotional response to something that is easy versus hard, and how much we want to persist with something that is easy versus hard. Okay, so this is why modeling is so important. We as a communication partner are such an important part of the equation because we can provide that to our users. It is hard for us. I think that, as much as we can develop community around it, if, as a parent or a caregiver of someone with Angelman syndrome, someone who with complex communication needs, having someone else to help you kind of, where you can watch them do it and they can watch you do it can be so important. And so useful for kind of moving us all along in developing our AAC skill set. So the fourth foundational understanding that we are going to talk about, and I'm going to go through this one quickly because I'm trying to keep on top of my time, is that time is an important factor and that it's a two-part factor. Long-term language development occurs over many, many, many years. So we have to be patient. This isn't something that's going to happen just because a device is in place. It is not magic. And then I also want to talk about time in the moment. So in the context of an interaction, why it's important to reframe wait time as think time. So language development occurs over the course of several years. I think ages 0 to 5 is a pretty solid kind of understanding of that language development period, though by some definitions, even up to ages 7 and 9. There's just such an explosion of language development. And pay attention, like that development is shaped by feedback from communication partners. So when kids are talking to us, when they're developing language, when they're sharing what they know and understand, they are getting feedback from us almost during every exchange from ages 0 to 5. We are repeating what they say, we are reframing, we are extending, we are attributing meaning. We are a key part of that language development process. And if you just kind of break it down, a child who is 6 months old to 18 months old and how drastically different their language and communication skills are. At 18 months, kids have a repertoire of words. They may be starting to put words together. From 18 months to 3 years, oh my goodness, it's just tremendous. 3-year-olds have so much to say. They're understood by 75% of people, even unfamiliar partners. And at age 5, kids are using language, at school. They're using it for, to be, say so very much. So language is not this activity that we carve out time for in a day, but it's embedded in all of our interactions. Always think of it as it's not a time in the schedule, it's relevant at all times in the schedule. And I actually think that that really is great in terms of AAC because we don't have to have AAC learning time every day. That might happen in some ways, but we can just pull out these moments where AAC is used throughout the day. And that's really reflective of language development. The other piece is that adults are not gatekeepers of words. Kids are going to self-select their vocabulary. This is why kids will come out with a cuss word, and we know exactly what parent or what person in their life uses that word because they are going to select words that are meaningful and relevant to what they're thinking or feeling. So when we think in terms of robust AAC, we need to provide kids a variety of words so they can embrace that. Their communicative potential by selecting the words that mean so much to them. Wrong screen. Okay, reframing wait time as think time looks like this. Think time is what may be required to support processing, maybe vision, maybe motor planning, and perhaps all of the above. So wait time is not dead time. It's not time that's just passing. As you wait, you might even observe changes in behavior. You might notice head movements. You might, notice shifting, body shifting. You might notice like hands moving. You might notice, a rhythm that shifts. And there is a balance to be struck. If a child's just waiting you out and you can kind of figure that out, You want to address it, but you also just want to be really respectful of the fact that a child may need think time, and it may look a variety of ways, and it might be needed for a variety of purposes. I have this video that I do not have permission to share, but in a nutshell, it's a little guy, and he was just a kiddo that we were struggling to move forward with communication with him, because we couldn't get him to interact with tools, very consistently. And so we were pondering wait time, and we took a video of him activating a switch to turn on music. And what we saw is that it took him 55 seconds to recruit his motor plan, and to just kind of process what the need was in that moment. But when he activated his switch to turn his music back on, it was a smooth, well executed, like just in one fell swoop, he reached out and he activated the switch. There was no kind of groping or hit and miss, trying to search for it. He just needed that much time to pull it all together. So it's very informative when we can really kind of realize what kind of think time an individual may need. And not every individual needs this, but it's so important to recognize. The last foundational understanding is going to take up the rest of our session, and this is that communication partners are such an important part of the language and AAC learning equation. So we need to connect with individuals and have fun in those moments, because communication is all about connection, and connection has to have that positive, we need to get that dopamine going in order to keep that, to make it so meaningful. Also, it can be really awkward, and we can't always know if it doesn't always feel like we're doing it right, but give yourself grace. This is a journey that is it's kind of the long game. So it's something we persist, because there's always new learning, and there's so much, the change, might feel like it's happening really slowly, but over time, it's such a worthwhile journey. So we're going to talk about this journey. There are 4 key elements. When Erin Sheldon and I did the communication pilot, the communication partner training pilot, we really spent a lot of time pondering, like, what does it look like to support communication partners? What's the formula for making this happen? Well, there's no formula, but we did sort of kind of suss out these 4 elements that really we have to create this balance in turn. And you'll notice that
loading everything up in the car. They pulled Giovanni over traffic stop.
I think
what would you have?
You'll notice this isn't linear. The graphic on here is from a spirograph, because these are things that kind of repeat and revisit and circle back multiple times. So far, we've spent a lot of time with the information pieces, learning about language and AAC and how they interconnect and how the components kind of integrate with one another. Technology and tools is a bit beyond the scope of this session. That could be, full day's worth. But at the very beginning, I provided you that link so that you could find, you can have access to the communication board as we go through these strategies. But this is also very dynamic. Customization is needed. You might find that you need specific tools for specific activities. But the skills and the habits piece is about the doing. So we're going to talk about the doing. And as you do, you're going to learn more. So that cycles back to the information piece. Habits is related to the being automatic and just having it kind of an integrated and embedded part of your life of an AAC family. So these are all, they kind of lay on top of each other. And I think that the spirograph is a really good representation of how they integrate. But I do think it can be beneficial to kind of pull them out a little bit to see what they look like. So within the skills and habits piece, there's probably many different ways that you could define this, but I think that we can think about how are we going to plan for AAC, for making it accessible and having our own sort of readiness to dive in. Sometimes getting started is the hardest part, so we're going to go through some strategies about ways that you can plan for AAC. We're also going to go through strategies about what it looks like to speak AAC, so to develop our skills as a communication partner. Then we're going to look at strategies about how we can invite our AAC users into the interaction, participate, and however they respond, how we can respond back. But I do want to acknowledge that this is not quite as straightforward as what I'm going to present it. I fully acknowledge that there can be so many challenges in implementing AAC. So the first one that I just want to acknowledge is that early language behaviors are exploratory. The same is true for AAC, and they can be disruptive, or at least perceived as disruptive. So these behaviors might include things like babbling or self-talk or repetition. As kids are developing verbal speech, they babble. Preschools can often be very noisy, even as kids parallel play because they are self-talking. Where they just talk about their play and talk about what they're doing and do all the voices. And then repetition, my 7 and 9-year-olds still, when they get kind of a noodle in their head, they will run around the house and repeat it over and over. Very annoying, but it's what they're doing. So AAC learners, they also engage in those behaviors. They're gaining ownership of their voice, and it's important we recognize that. That exploration can help them to be more purposeful. And when we provide feedback, it kind of helps to show them, oh, that's meaningful, and that, I can get a response from others. We might think of it as a stimming behavior, but even stimming behaviors are purposeful. They're often related to regulation. So we don't want to be dismissive of those behaviors. We might need to move, depending on the environment and what's happening, we might need to move the child to a different, a quieter place so that they can do their exploration and not disturb others. Or maybe we need to engage with them and give them more feedback and explore with them. Or maybe we just need to let them alone and not interfere. On the other end of this, emergent AAC learners may also be dismissive of AAC. So I may hear things like, he isn't interested, they don't look at it, or she walks away. And I would encourage you to just take off the pressure and don't require them to do anything with it. Alternating low tech and high tech has some novelty to it, so that might spark an interest. You can also show pleasure in exploring it for yourself. So maybe you're looking through a magazine and you're using AAC to comment on what you're seeing in your magazine. It's a way of enticing them to be curious about it because you are enjoying it. Also, like having AAC happen among other family members. Cousins and siblings can be especially motivating. And then I would also encourage you to attend to what they may be telling you about their experience. If they have a staff person, a therapist, an educator, even another family member who is forcing AAC, it might be that they see it as work and then they resist it. So their perception of there might be a message in there that's worth paying attention to. As you are taking off the pressure, I would encourage you to continue to embed AAC. And when you do this, you're teaching that it is a valid and valued form of communication and helping to normalize it. And by normalizing, you're showing the power of it. You're engaging with others with it. So, it's there. And that can give them the necessary time to adapt and develop an interest. And there's no real time frame on this. Some families, and even adult AAC users will talk about how they went years without being interested in it, and then they realize the value of it. It can take a while. So I want to acknowledge the challenges and perhaps give you some strategies and ways to think about it and encourage you to continue. So when we plan for AAC, I just want to kind of point out that what we've already talked about includes providing robust AAC. So that's kind of the first thing on our checklist. But the 5 strategies that we're going to go through include AAC everywhere, notice when you are speaking in core, activity-specific language walkthrough, I'll explain that, as well as before, during, and after, and pausing to make space for AAC. So that's just our checklist. But when we plan for AAC and have it everywhere, it might include things like looking at your environment and realizing that you're going to need a low tech in the house and in the car, in different parts of the house, maybe in the bathroom, maybe on the back deck. It might also include looking at the communication partners of the individual and thinking, gosh, how can others have access to this so that it's easier for everyone to be using it. Maybe it's a word on the lanyard, maybe you have a second device. I've also seen armbands like in baseball play or football, the cuffs that they use that have the plays in them. And then you might also consider like what needs to be in place in terms of a backup. Maybe you have a secondary device for when things get damaged or low batteries. Maybe you have a low tech. So thinking about the logistics can go a long way towards making AAC available. It might also include things like is, how is there a mount or like a way to set it up on the table that's easy, or a strap or harness, any of those kinds of considerations that are going to make it so that you have what you need when you need it, and others in the environment too as well. When we notice speaking in core, this actually sounds, I think it sounds a little bit silly, but this is really just a mental kind of exercise for us as communication partners to notice when the things coming out of our mouth are actually core vocabulary, because then when we start to notice it, then we are better able to map it to an AAC system. So, for instance, if you're reading a book or a magazine, consider how many of these phrases might just come out of your mouth. I like it, or I don't like it. Oh, let me see. Oh, look at that. Turn it. What's next? Oh, what is that? Get another one. Not that. I want something different. I can say, like, those are all things that I would say. So it's so much of it is core words. It might not all be on the front page, but these are really accessible words in a robust AAC system. So it's kind of when we become aware of what it feels like speaking core, then it's much easier to make the transition. Another way that we can plan for AAC is to do a walkthrough. So I'm just going to a language walkthrough, and this is really just kind of picking up the tool, the device, and thinking, gosh, I'm going to sit down with my son, and we're going to watch a show, or we're going to play blocks, or we're going to go like hang out in the backyard, or we're going to go to the store. During that activity, what are some things I might model? And just thinking about it ahead of time, a little bit of pre-planning. So if we're thinking about it during a video, I might say something like, ooh, what are we watching? Or I might say, oh, look, what is he doing? Or I might say, you really like this show. Or I wonder if he's going to get it. So you can see that it's, moving my screens around here. You can see that just taking a moment to brainstorm can give you some of the confidence that you might need to move forward with AAC. And it doesn't have to be, a whole half hour. It can just be a phrase or two, or maybe three. Before, during, and after is one of my favorite strategies because it takes some of the most exciting experiences that kids have and it makes them accessible with AAC without the pressure of the logistics. Before, it's very simple. If you're going to do something fun and exciting where AAC is legitimately going to be in the way. So if you're outside sledding and building a snowman, if you're playing in the water, if you are, it's still kind of beach season with water and sand and high-tech devices don't get along very well. If you are going for a hayride or something like that, and you have to hold the child and the device, and it just all feels very cumbersome. I would invite you before you go out to use AAC to talk about where you're going and what you're going to do and when you're going to do it. You might already be doing it. But make sure AAC is a part of that. And then during the activity, use it if you can. But if you can't, because of movement, even on the playground, because playgrounds are all about that momentum and that movement. Have it available. Take photos, and then afterwards, look at the photos and use that as a context for talking about what you did. Using AAC. So talk about what you did and who was there and whatnot. And if grandma walks in the door because she's coming to visit, have that conversation with her too and show her the photos. We all use photos, since we all have our phones in our pockets, as a context for talking about things that are really meaningful to us. When I am talking to my coworkers, my family, my friends, I will often pull out my phone and navigate to a photo of something funny my kids did and talk about it. This is really the same idea. So the kids are getting that iterative practice with their AAC about something that is super meaningful to them without the pressure of navigating AAC in that moment when it may very likely disrupt the interaction. So I love before, during, and after. And then if they're really super motivated, you might make a digital book. You might drop those 3 or 5 photos into an album on their device so that they can look at it and revisit it and kind of make it part of their system, if you will. The last plan for AAC strategy is to make space for AAC, and this is really about taking those moments and creating a pause. I think because aided language requires stuff, whether it's paper-based stuff or technology stuff. We have to have a moment to kind of organize this stuff. And that can so often get in the way of those communication opportunities when we're out doing life, when we're not sitting at a desk or sitting at a table, in a classroom, or lounging on our couch in the living room. So to make space for AAC, I think one thing that can be really helpful is to gain the child's attention by simply stating, "I have something to say," or with the right intonation, "I have something to say." Or, "Oh, I want to tell you about this," or, "I want to tell you what I'm thinking. Oh, let's talk about that." Or, "Oh, I have a comment about that." That statement creates this pause where you're not putting any pressure on the child or the individual. You are catching their attention, and it gives you that moment to get AAC in front of them without kind of having to chase them down, if you will, or sort of manage that. And so that pause is right there. It slows down the interaction, and they're ready to hear what you have to say. My experience is that kids don't always respond to this right out of the gate the first time you do it, but once they've heard you do it a dozen times, they start to recognize the purpose of those statements, of that intonation. They start to recognize when that pause is coming into play, so that you can start to have those moments. And again, with AAC, it's not a moment, it's not a time on the schedule, it's part of all times throughout the day. So rather than carving out that chunk, this is how we seize those moments. This is one of the ways we can seize those moments. So to create a habit around things, around planning for AAC, some things to think about in terms of setting goals. You might think about how you might need to set up the environment for an upcoming activity. Think about backups, charging routines, having a home for AAC when it's not in use, like at nighttime, or when the child's in the bath, or whatever. Consider that portability piece. What does it look like? What needs to happen in order to make it go where they go? You might pre-plan with a language walkthrough. You might set yourself a goal of using an "I have something to say" statement twice a day. So those are just some things to think about in terms of getting AAC started. So 5 strategies for speaking AAC, and I notice I'm short on time. It always happens. So here we go. Our strategies from above include accept multiple modalities and use the alphabet. In addition to that, we're going to look at verbal referencing, attributing meaning, commenting, give me 5, and leverage requesting. So verbal referencing is this great strategy that I use as a parent all the time, where you describe what an individual is doing, you attribute meaning, and then you might extend that even further with kind of an open-ended best guess. So here's what it looks like. You might say to a child, "I see you smiling, I think you like it." And you're going to map that to AAC by saying "you like." So you're taking their nonverbal communication and you're giving them language. You're giving them, you're inferring it, and you're assigning those specific words to show them what symbolic language looks like to convey that same message. You are reaching for the puzzle. Let's play it. Let's do it. Let's make it. Okay, so any of those types of words would come into play. So you're reading what they're doing. Again, this is kind of a freebie that you always have in your back pocket. Observe, state what they're doing, and then tell them what it means. "I can see you don't like this. Let's get something different." Do not like, get different is how we map that to AAC. Attributing meaning is this sort of nebulous idea. Attribute meaning can apply to any modality that an individual is using, and it's closely related to verbal referencing. But I think just to kind of dive into it a little bit, when we attribute meaning to a child's communication through whatever modality, we are developing a sense of I am. Students with complex needs can find themselves as passive participants much of the time. Things happen to, for, and around them. But we give them really meaningful feedback about how they are being a communicator and how they can influence the environment and the actions of others. And we do that repeatedly, and over time, we are empowering them as communicators to express their authentic voice. Commenting, like I said, is my favorite communicative function. It is informative. It's always relevant. It's a great way to connect and have fun. In the interest of time, we are not going to do this, but I think that one thing to know about commenting is that it can be beneficial to practice it. So funny videos, funny animal videos and kid videos is a fun way that I'll often do this during workshops, where we'll just watch a clip and then we'll use our core words to come up with a comment. So, just consider like the things that are really meaningful to your individual and what kinds of comments you can make to kind of extend those interactions and create that social closeness. Okay, Give Me Five is a strategy that I pulled from the AAC Language Lab. And it's just this idea that when you have those fringe words that we absolutely want to include and are part of the individual's life, we can expand upon that by thinking about core words that are going to go with it. Okay, so think about a hand. You've got the pizza in the middle. That's the noun. That's the thing. That's what we're going to talk about. What are 5 core words that might go with it? Well, we might have words like not, like, more, good, and on. What do you like on your pizza? Or I like that. Ooh, do not put pepperoni on my pizza. I want more. Are you having more? This is so good. What are we going to put on our pizza? So those are all words that are related, and you'll notice that you can start to use them in combination. So this is a way when we feel like we're feeling stuck, like we're, really focusing on those fringe words. Give Me Five is a strategy that can help us think about communicative functions and think about how to pull more, some of those core words into the interaction. Video is another example. So 5 core words that might go with that could include things like, what are we watching? I like that. Let's watch something different. That is interesting, or that is silly. Okay, so we can use it as a placeholder. And then do, what's he going to do? What are you, did you see what he did? That kind of thing. So let's see, we'll do 15 seconds. In 15 seconds, can you list a word or a few that you might include, a core word that you might have as bubbles? Pop. Blow. Mm-hmm. Okay. So other words you might have get. Let's get the bubbles. I like the bubbles. Look, they go up, or they go over there, or they go in the grass. They went up. I want bubbles. Okay. So these are all words that we can combine. Pop and blow are absolutely words that you would include with bubbles. Okay. So the next strategy, the last one in this section, has to do with leveraging requesting. So requesting is this really powerful way that individuals kind of get access to the things that are important to them. Individuals who are often really effective at using nonverbal communication because it's effective and it's efficient. I can point, I can gesture, I can make my unique vocalization, I can get it myself. So it's really, really powerful in that way because it gives us insight into what is motivating an individual at that moment in time. But communication isn't linear. So kids don't have to master requesting in a formal way before they can experience other communicative functions. So the power here is that they're showing what they want, and now we can extend and expand upon that to model other language for them, to engage with them around that using a variety of different words without kind of creating this power struggle dynamic where we're making them request it. So the power is that we know it's motivating, and then we can use that, that's our in, to communicate with them in different ways. The pitfall of requesting is that we often do get into power struggles about tell me what you want, hit the button, be specific. It's often very goal-oriented rather than person-centered. We have to kind of be thoughtful. Is this a test? We really want them to be trusted? Is that going to undermine the motivation? Does it really matter to them? When we are really strictly focusing on limits and we are on requesting, we are limiting screen taking, we are limiting engagement because these boring and contrived kind of dynamics emerge. And we're limiting our opportunity to model a variety of other, parts of language. So when we understand that it's really powerful because it's motivating and that we have to embrace that motivation, in a specific way to make sure that that motivation continues, it really opens the door. It becomes this gateway. where if a child is requesting a food item, we might say, good choice. I like that too. That's your favorite. Or maybe I'm surprised you chose that. Or maybe we offer another choice, strawberry or blueberry. But we can extend that moment in a, using other language. So I think that it's really important to kind of recognize what we can do with requesting to make it as rich as possible, and use as much language as possible. I also want to note that we want to make sure that we are offering valid choices. So we want to make sure our choices are meaningful to the individual, and we also always want to offer something different. Because if we offer, grapes and carrots, and the individual wants graham crackers, and they don't have a way to say that, then maybe they're not going to respond, or maybe they're just going to top them both, and you won't have a straight answer anyway. Or maybe they're going to get frustrated and get frustrated. When they respond in any of those ways and something different is an option, we can say, oh, I think you want something different, extend the choices, and continue to make that interaction very much a dynamic that everyone wants to be a part of. So when we are setting goals to create habits around speaking AAC could include things like select a strategy and use it 4 times this week, or use every communicative function every day. Or maybe you're going to model 3 different activities per day, whatever that looks like. Maybe you're going to use AAC for 3 turns during mealtime, and then you'll add a routine per week so that you're kind of using it, across a variety of activities. Maybe you select pairs of words and you try to use those 5 times a day. Those aren't going to be the only words you use, but you'll start to see how often those words become relevant throughout the day. You might decide that you're going to use AAC at the dinner table twice this week, and everybody at the table uses AAC to comment, not just, a communication partner and the AAC learner. So those are some ways to get that started. Okay, so we are past time. It is 12:02. We have 5 more. I can go quickly and keep going. I guess I just need a little feedback. Should I wrap this up, or
hey, Tabi.
5 more minutes.
Hi, Tabi.
Hey, Amanda.
Yeah, I think that you could probably go a few more minutes. I know there's a few questions in the chat box if you want to try to address those really quick as well. I think people would appreciate that. But if you have more, I think as long as we're done by about 12:10, I think we're fine.
Okay. Let me go. I'll try to do this in like 2.5 minutes, and then I'll address questions.
Sounds good.
So invite a response. From above, we have wait time. And then read the moment, prioritize the joy and connection. And I think that this is really important. These are the strategies we're going to take a look at. So the first one is when you are inviting when you have modeled AAC, you've commented, you've done Gimme 5, you leverage requesting to extend and expand upon what they have offered, or what they've requested. We need to then know what it looks like for them to respond to us. And this is a continuum of things that's going to look different for every individual. I love this graphic in theory, but I think it's a little backwards, so I kind of rewrote it. But for some, the exposure might be what they're getting at, and they're just tolerating it, all the way through like being curious and maybe even exploring it on their own. So knowing what a response looks like for your individual AAC learner is really important in terms of knowing what to expect, or how to respond. So once we've one way to invite an individual to respond is to ask an open-ended question. So open-ended questions are not natural for most of us. We kind of have to think about it and practice it. But it sounds something like, what did you think about that? Or how does it make you feel? What part did you find interesting? Or what does it make you think of? When we follow that up, we're going to give an expectant look or an expectant pause. And that just conveys that I'm being patient and I want to hear what you have to say. The individual may or may not respond, but that's okay. That's okay, because they are learning by hearing and seeing you use AAC, and they're learning that they have a place in this, even if they're not seizing it at that moment. So if an individual does not respond, you don't want to hold that interaction captive. You don't want to persist. You want to say something like, you don't seem to have an opinion. Let's check with, and then name somebody else. You might just label what you see. I can see you thinking or looking, and then you might just have to move on with the interaction. You might offer your opinion. I think that is scary or funny or interesting. So when you offer your opinion, you're able to move the conversation along while providing language input. You can also use it as an opportunity to kind of shift it and move on if you feel like it's not working for them. You don't seem interested. Let's try something different. Also, when you invite and respond, knowing what scaffolding looks like to avoid overprompting is really important. The AAC coach is a fabulous, can't recommend it enough resource for learning about how to be an awesome communication partner. It is the AAC coach. I just want to Google it. You'll love it. This is one of her graphics that I think is incredibly valuable. She takes prompts and cues and kind of shifts our understanding, of what this looks like. We are not teaching a child how to tie a shoe or do a math problem. We do not know what the end goal is. We want them to be autonomous communicators. We don't know what they want to say. We can offer choices, but we need to leave it kind of open. So we're going to model, give that wait time. If they are initiating that they are trying to respond, then maybe we're going to prompt them. Maybe you have something to say. We might point to their device, the gesture, can you say it with this? We might even open up like a feelings page and say, I wonder if you feel happy or sad, excited or frustrated, and see if either of those choices jive with them. Ultimately, we are prompting kids to communicate, but we're not telling them what to communicate. We're encouraging them to explore their device to see if their message is available, if they can get to it. And we're going to make our best guess. But we don't want to over prompt, because we want to make sure that they know that their voice is what we're looking for, and we're not going to ask them to be compliant to whatever message we assume that they have. So goals around this might be something like asking open-ended questions, counting to 10 before we model more so that wait time is in place. And with response not required, you might think about, are there specific kinds of things that might be especially appropriate for your loved one? So, okay. I will look at the questions in the chat, and then there are the links to the slide deck and then my contact information if you want any of that. Okay, so let's see. I have, for beginning AAC user, how many core words should be on the home screen? I want it to be robust, but I don't want it to visually overwhelm them or make it hard for them to select words for their fine motor capacity. Well, there's no formula to answer this one, but I'll give you a couple pieces of information to kind of guide this. You do want it to be, generally speaking, the device should be physically and visually accessible. That said, we might look at alternative strategies, access strategies. If the physical piece is a component, we might look at a key guard. We might look at things like partner assisted scanning. Visually, we want kids to be able to access their tools, but if vision is a concern, then we want to really focus on motor planning, because when kids know where their icons are located and they learn how to get to them, then there's less need for visual discrimination. In the early learning stages, there's a strategy called masking, where you can kind of gray out some of the buttons to really emphasize ones that you might be working on. Usually with teams, I will recommend that you might use masking for an activity, but then when that activity is over, you want to take masking off because you want kids to be able to explore. Kids are really surprising. Another thing to think about, and I don't know if this specifically, Matt, if this specifically applies to you, but sometimes we kind of think kids are showing us that they can do things even though we're not really interpreting it that way. Like if you have a child who is selecting icons on a tablet screen, and they are showing some visual discrimination, some fine motor, and some probably motor planning, because those things don't change. So those are some of the pieces that kind of come into play. I will say that as a communication partner, I typically find it really challenging to model. Not that it can't be done, but the ease of modeling decreases significantly, I would say, on a screen that has less than 45 buttons. So I will almost always start there and see how I can, adjust the contrast, try masking, look at key guards, to see if I can make that accessible to a child before making it any smaller. Okay, we are at the 2:10 mark, so I think that's my go time. I will, let's see, I will try to answer the questions and come back to those in writing. All right, thank you all so much for your time. I am sorry I went over. I just can't help myself sometimes. I really do try. I hope you all are enjoying the conference and have a great day.